So, Battin, the fact that you kind of grew up in that era, in that area, uh, I'm assuming you got some of that. Would you describe your style of play flamboyant? And this kind of back up. Let's kind of talk about, you know, kind of. You say you play multiple instruments. Kind of, is there a primary instrument you play, and why did you decide to pick up so many instruments?
Just gravitated toward it. I mean, I grew up with a piano in the house, so you know, me being a curious little boy, you know, I just banged on the piano, you know, and so my mother decided to give me piano lessons at the age of 8, and so my piano teacher, she recognized that I had some musical ability, and she said, well, you should get him a saxophone. And so at the age of 9, I started playing saxophone. And then later on, when I was about 16, that's when I came into this Hendrix thing, you know what I mean? And then at that time, I remember I picked up it was an old Harmony acoustic guitar. And then I just started tinkering with it. And I had a guy at school who showed me a couple of chords, and then, but of course, you know, knowing about the keyboards, the piano, I already had somewhat of a knowledge of, you know, of where to go and what to do with it, and so I just, you know, the guitar just sort of slowly made its way into my heart, and I just, like I say, you know, the guitar is just something that I love because of all of the different things that you can do with it, especially the electric guitars, because you can play an acoustic guitar and you can get good sounds, but man, once you put that electricity on that guitar, man, and then you can control it, you know, you can control the voltage, control the gain, and control all of the different electronic aspects of it, it just becomes a whole different animal. You know what I mean? And it's exhilarating, you know what I mean, to be able to play. But now, as far as being flamboyant, you know, I'm sort of a chameleon, you know what I mean? You know, I can take that flamboyant color and I can show you that. I can't say that that's really me. Maybe it is. I mean, I guess you can't get it out of me if it ain't in me. You know what I mean? But I'm just a serious musician that I love music. I study music. I'm a musicologist of sorts, and you know, I love the history of music, and just like even I was telling you earlier that I played with the original Pete Parliament, Funkadelic, and when I was in school, I did some papers, some sociology, musicology papers on Parliament, Funkadelic, when they had the record out called America Eats Its Young. And so so that's kind of, you know, I mean, back during the days of Maggot Brain, and of course we know Maggot Brain was Eddie Hazel, and a lot of that was influenced by Hendrix, because being with Parliament, I learned that that's where the whole Funkadelic concept came, was from George Clinton going to Jimi Hendrix concert. So he brought that concept back, you know, and so P-Funk became sort of like the first black rock group. So the stint that I had with P-Funk, then that really kind of brought that out, even though I was always into Hendrix and I was always, you know, trying to learn and see what that was Hendrix was trying to do. But when I started playing with P-Funk, you know, it's just like everybody, like all of the guitar players are like guitar warriors, you know. And so, you know, we used to kick it big time, you know, with the Hendrix-esque type of flavor, because when you think about it, that's what it is. You know, Hendrix is the originator of rock guitar. It wouldn't be no rock guitar if it wasn't for Hendrix, you know what I mean? And then, but when you go back to these old cats like John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters and all these guys, they would experiment with feedback and the overdriving of the amplifiers and stuff like that. But Hendrix just took the thing to a whole nother level. And then of course, you know, he was influenced to a degree, you know, by the psychedelics, you know. And if anybody's ever, if you or anybody in the audience know anything about the psychedelics, you know about the different perspective that you may acquire when experiencing these things.
So you mentioned, and I heard you say it a few times, that you played with Parliament. And before we got on camera, you were talking, tell me about a story about how you end up joining the band. Retell that story really quickly, because I think that was kind of interesting.
Well, a friend of mine, Billy Mims, he joined when Fuzzy, Calvin, Grady, and Ray, when they broke from George Clinton in the 70s. Billy Mims was there. The late great Billy Mims was the guitar player, and so he and I had met. I forgot where it was that we had met, but we had kind of got a liking to each other. And so they decided they were going to do a record, the Parliament. And so Billy said, well, man, you should do some saxophone, you know, because a lot of that stuff, you know, it's the funk and it's the Maceo funk. And that's one of my main influences on saxophone is like Maceo Parker. And so he said, yeah, man, we need some Maceo kind of saxophone on this cut. So I went in, we got so I played on the cut, and as we got to talk, I was telling them about how I had written the musicology, sociology papers when I was in college. So they ended up, we ended up, you know, bonding. They ended up coming to my studio. We ended up doing most of at least parts of most of the songs in my studio. And then I would be playing some of the stuff. I would play saxophone on some of it. I would play keyboards on. So by the time we finished the project, they were like, man, well, you know all of the songs and everything. Why don't you go on the road with it? So what had happened was I had, up to that point, you know, I had been a single parent. And so I couldn't go on the road because I had a son that I was, you know, obligated to take care of, you know what I'm saying? But at that point, my son had just moved out and got a job at Georgia State. And I was free to go at that particular point and had never really been on a major tour, you know, with anybody. So I just really jumped at that. And so I ended up playing a pretty prominent part in the group because they hired me as a keyboard player. But of course, all of the saxophone stuff, like saxophone solo on Flashlight and Make My Funk, the P-Funk, I played all of that stuff. But we were rehearsing one day, and then we was doing Red Hot Mama from Louisiana. And so that's when we were initially rehearsing for the tour. And so we were assigning solos. And so we had two other guitar players, you know, Billy and Gene Thomas, which is Shady Grady's son. And so we played it. So I said, man, won't y'all give me a little bit of that? Meaning the solo. And so Fuzzy looked at me and said, oh, you play lead? I said, well, I think I do. And so he said, okay, well, take it back from the bridge. And then we get out from the bridge. You come in, Battin. All right, so we took it from the bridge. I came in, and then by the end of the song, they said, well, okay, then, well, maybe, what kind of amp should we be getting you for the tour? What kind of guitar amp, you know? And so obviously, that was some of my Hendrix stuff coming out, you know what I mean? And because I never really studied, maybe other than Magic Brain, and I can't say that I really studied that much, but my soloing chops were almost entirely influenced by Jimi Hendrix, you know.
Wow.
And so that kind of, you know, that was a wonderful experience, you know what I mean? Because man, we would do like the beginning of Maggot Brain, where Gino, Shady Grady's son, he would play the guitar part, but I would always start off, because you know when Maceo was with P-Funk, he would start off with the flute solo. Of course, I play saxophone. If you play saxophone, you should be able to play the flute. And so I would do that saxophone intro, man. Then I would stop the saxophone. Then I would go into this keyboard thing, which was sort of like a George Duke kind of keyboard thing. And incidentally, when you think about it, if you remember George Duke from the early and mid 70s, you'll see that he made that whole key bending thing on the keyboard. All of that stuff came from Hendrix.
Wow.
When you listen to it, you listen to some of the stuff that he was doing, where he was bending the note. He was one of the first ones to really do that real soulful, bluesy bending of the notes on the synthesizer. And
wow.
so all of that stuff came in, and you know, it all to me comes back to Hendrix, and then his sort of universal, seems like universal appreciation of the different genres, because you know you got the, you know, at the time when he was famous, you know, you had a lot of you know, you had the folk music was big, you know what I mean? And back during the time of Woodstock, if you look at the Woodstock concerts, you'll see that folk music was big, you know, back during the Vietnam War, where, you know, where you had the whole freedom movement, you know, where people were becoming free from, you know, a lot of the old-fashioned concepts that had prevailed in this country up to that point. And I don't want to take up the whole interview. Man.
You are the star, you know, so that's fine. I mean, I'm enjoying listening to all the experience and the perspective you add to it, which made me think, like, when we come watch this show, not only do we get a great performance, but it sounds like we're going to get a little peek into history as well, history in the making, and some great artists. Just kind of,
I always let the people know about the greatness that is Macon, Georgia, and the artists that came from there, and really some of the artists still from down there. I mean, man, there are some absolute monsters. Some of the people down in Macon right now today, they're just absolutely scary. Wow. When you listen to them. Well, no, this one guy named Tracy Orr. Tracy Orr, and then Darrell Freeman, which he's up here in Atlanta now, but he's done quite a few things. You familiar with Darrell?
Not familiar with Darrell.
Oh yeah, these guys are just, oh man, they're just off the chart, man, in terms of just ability, you know, and you know, music is the music, and being in the music business, man, is just a real blessing, man, you know, because you know, the ability to communicate you know, deep thoughts, you know, to communicate emotions. It's one thing to communicate in words, but then that's a whole other thing to communicate a higher level emotion. Not the lower emotions, you know, anger, fear, and all that kind of stuff like that. But music allows you to communicate a higher level. You know, aesthetics is a very high emotional state. And then when you are able to articulate that state by manipulating notes and chords and phrases, you know what I mean? It's just a wonderful thing, man.